Hey everybody, my name's Jodey Hogeland. I'm the PowerStore Global Evangelist for Dell Technologies, and here today to talk to you about PowerStore with Lifecycle Extension. And Lifecycle Extension is an add-on to our ProSupport capabilities. So customers can actually purchase ProSupport with Lifecycle Extension that gives them the opportunity to have their PowerStore ecosystem stay fresh for long periods of time and for the long run of the product. So at Dell Technologies, we've got a very robust strategy around PowerStore and very long-term development efforts around the product. So for example, with Lifecycle Extension, when customers are purchasing, say, current architecture, which is Generation 2, we've been shipping PowerStore since 2020. We're on the second generation of hardware. And during that time, we've actually had customers leveraging this capability to do upgrades from Generation 1 to Generation 2 non-disruptively. So for customers that say, hey, when you come out with some form of new technology, so let's say Gen X, and when that becomes available, I want access to that without having to repurchase everything. And that's what that first option gives you for being in Lifecycle Extension. But we don't stop there. Where there are other vendors in the industry kind of do stop there. It's like, hey, every 3 years we'll give you a controller upgrade or we'll get you to the next generation of the technology. We're doing that and more. So with Lifecycle Extension, there's a second option, which, by the way, personal favorite here, this is my favorite option, where we have upgrade to higher model. So in this case, you have a 3200 as an example. And you're running on that 3200 and you come in and say, hey, Dell team, I need a little bit more horsepower than what I'm running today. Now, this becomes a very stark differentiator from an overall competitive perspective because a lot of vendors lock capacity to specific storage models. PowerStore doesn't do that. So from the entry-level 500 to the top-end 9200, PowerStore supports the same amount of capacity with single drive scalability. So here, we're talking about the opportunity to say, it's not because I need to add a little bit of capacity, where others might force you into a controller upgrade, a purchased upgrade to get capacity. Here we're just saying the customer needs a little more performance. As a result, you can leverage that lifecycle extension capability and literally non-disruptively upgrade that to the next higher model. So let's say in this example, a 5200T. So a customer can literally say, hey, I've got a 3200, I've got some workloads that are coming in, I have no capacity issues, but I do want to make sure that I'm going to be able to fire on my performance cylinders as we move forward. We can execute that and do a non-disruptive upgrade to the next higher model from where you are. So in this case, say the 5200. The reason why it's one of my favorite aspects of Lifecycle Extension is because there's a bit of a nuance to understand here. The 3200, when you play this out and you think about this over time, let's say you're doing this with a 6-year support contract, right? So you're getting the 3200 purchased. You're paying for the maintenance of the 3200 for 6 years. And then you're doing an upgrade to a 5200. But from a price perspective, you paid for a 32. Your maintenance run over 6 years was for the 32, but now you've upgraded to a 52. So it's like purchasing a 3200, getting the maintenance rate of a 3200, but then upgrading to a 5200 at no additional cost. So that is a very cool opportunity for customers to be able to take advantage of, and it's my favorite, by the way. Then there's a third option that we bring to the table with Lifecycle Extension, and this is the ability to leverage PowerStore's scale out capability. So in this case, you have a 3200. We'll just stick with that same example. And here I've got a 3200 and I recognize that I'm going to be bringing some additional workloads, environments that might require the demand of bringing a new appliance into the ecosystem. So in this case, you've got your 3200. We're going to bring to the table a net new 3000 series. Whatever the current technology is what you get. So if it's a 3200 and that's what we're shipping, you get the 3200. If we're shipping something next generation, you get the equivalent within that family as well. So now you've got two 3200s in a scale out cluster. And in this case, you're just purchasing the additional capacity and the support that you need to make that environment run. And so whether it's waiting from one generation to the next generation, we've got you covered. If you're looking to say, you know what, I need a little more performance, I need a little more horsepower at no additional cost, you can execute and use that second option and get upgrades to higher. Or, hey, I need a whole new appliance, I need another array in this architecture to drive where I'm going in the future. You can execute on option 3 and scale out and leverage the scale out cluster capabilities. Now, as cool as all of that is, there's still more benefits to talk about at large. Now, if we look at this holistically, there's a couple of things that we're bringing to the table for customers, not only just option 1, option 2, option 3, but things like discounts on capacity. So if you're in Lifecycle Extension and you're purchasing additional capacity going forward, you're going to get some very good rates on those capacity adds. And by the way, from any vendor's perspective, guess what the most expensive part of a flash technology is? It's the media, right? So there's huge benefit here in offsetting cost and delivering long-term strategy to the customer. But there's an additional option within here as well, and that is a services assessment. So what we also deliver to the customer is to work with them, the customer directly, the Dell account team, and the partner of record. So keep in mind that we have a very focused effort on partner first when it comes to our strategy of bringing technology to our customers. So without leaving the partner out of the loop, Dell Services will engage with the account team from Dell, the partner of record, and then deliver to the customer a services overview that reviews the PowerStore ecosystem and environment, and then gives them any recommendations to make sure that that environment is running at optimal performance, scalability, and every aspect from one point to the end. So delivering option 1, option 2, option 3, discounting on capacity, moving forward in the architecture, as well as services that will come in, work with you, work with your strategic partner to understand, is everything running as optimal as it can in the ecosystem? And that is a look at Lifecycle Extension. So hopefully this is helpful. Have a great day.